What about this then? One thing we haven't talked about with any of the people we've had from CSGO that I want to ask you about. You touched on it there. You know, when you said the explanation, like for example in Counter-Strike, you find a little nook, you just take an angle, or they're not going to expect this off angle. I'm going to get the first guy at least. Maybe they trade me. The reason why that also doesn't work, like you say, is there are literally agents that essentially can see through walls, who can do different, like all the utility things they can do. Right. One thing I wondered that must be different about being an IGL in that sense is because in Counter-Strike every character is the same character. You just provide the difference in terms of how you play it. Right, there's an element of MOBA that doesn't exist in Counter-Strike, which is this. Essentially in MOBA, one thing that can be confusing is, because you don't play yourself all the other roles at a world-class level, essentially that's part of what coaching is actually explaining to a player what the other people in the other team can do to you. And I've heard, for example, like when a new champion gets released in League, there was an example here where, if anyone knows the game, when they released an ADC champion called Aphelios, it was one that had a super complicated kit that even had like RNG elements in it as to what gun you had at different points in time. And it meant that it wasn't as simple as like, you know, like he does this one thing here, right, avoid that. It was more like you had to know, like, depending on the situation, what he wants to do, what he wants you to do. And so it was actually mega complicated. And I heard basically those coaches just got their player who played the ADC role, and they sort of had him do like a little presentation almost like to his teammates, like, right, when they have this champion, here's what they're going to want to do, here's how we're going to avoid it, like, understand I'm going to call for these. And essentially, like, he almost had to, like I say, give like the scouting report for one role. So is it similar when you're trying to like figure out how to do things in Valorant? Because it must be very different to CS in that regard.
Yeah, there is a lot of what you described in Valorant. So like when you talk about like game plans, for example, or like that I would do a game plan, like my sort of game planning in this game would be, we're playing a certain map, and this map, like obviously like we prioritize this position over that position, but let's look at the enemy's composition. What do they have? Oh, they're running Astra, Sage, Breach, you know, Raze. That means that if you go into a certain position, their Astra has the gravity well, the Breach has a stun, the Raze will throw a nade at you. So you need to be able to find out like where they're setting up their traps. They're not going to run at you, guns out. They're going to set up traps, and then they're going to spring their traps at a certain point of the map. You need to find out where they're setting up that trap. You need to bait that trap, spring it, and then you need to make a reaction before they're getting their abilities off of cooldown. So Split's like a perfect map to talk about when it comes to this, because everyone sets up their Breach stun, Raze nade towards like B heaven area, and then maybe there's like an alarm bot or a camera or something that sees it, and then that's when they spring their trap. And you have an agent like, you know, Raze can go in and break stuff, or Chamber can go in, place a teleporter down. When the stun nade comes in, he teleports out, gets back to safety, and then you're like, okay, let's make our end goal right now, and let's, you know, let's execute. Their trap's gone. We can play the game now. That absolutely exists. So that's where the game plan comes in. It's like, this team, they have like no CC ability. Let's just run at them. They can't stop us. Run them down 5 people. This team, they have like really good CC for like one choke only. So if we're going to attack them, we need to bait it out at one choke, and then we split them. So we go from 2 different chokes at the same time. They can only lock down one or the other. They have to pick, and then we just seesaw them basically. That absolutely exists, and you just have to look at like what player or what agents are on the other team. But when it comes to other things like breaking down what like an agent can do or can't do, I think right now the game's very young. There's not so many agents. Everyone understands like all the agents. But one thing I learned from playing, you know, StarCraft 2 or playing Dota 2 is that anytime like a new like well, StarCraft 2 wasn't so much like a new thing. It was more Dota, like a new hero or something comes out. I always went into like there's like the demo thing in Dota where you could just like pick the hero, you can level it up, give yourself
it's like a sandbox type mode, right? You can just do whatever you want. Yeah.
You can give yourself whatever items you want, so you can see how it combos with whatever. You can spawn like enemy heroes, so you can see what your abilities do. I always did that, and then I would go and play the hero in a ranked game to just like learn about them, because like the worst thing is you go into a game and you play against a hero that you've like is brand new, you've never seen them before, and you're like literally like hovering your cursor over the tooltip to see what are these spells, like yes. what is this thing, like I can't even move, I can't cast spells, like what's going on, like it's piercing spell immunity, like what's going on, magic immunity, and you just don't know what's going on. It's like, play the agents. That's why I've always said since like I started playing Valorant, people should play every agent, and like at least in custom games or unrated, just to like learn the agent and just like get a feel for it. Even if it's like something as simple as like Raze, like, you know, Raze has a grenade, but like try double satcheling and see like
Interactions and stuff.
yeah, exactly. So you should like at least on some base level understand that every individual should know that. They should know how it is to Sova ulti if you're close to someone versus if you're far from someone. Everyone should know how long it takes for like a molly to land, or like, you know, if you throw a molly at like some like slant on the ground, it's going to do some weird bounce. Like everyone should understand this, and then you should be able to understand it because that's how you're going to be able to counterplay it. Can you counterplay it? How does it feel to be on like each end of it? You have to put yourself in your opponent's shoes, or you have to put yourself in your teammate's shoes. Like you're asking your teammate to do something. It's like, dude, I can't do that. Like I can't satchel from this side of the map to that side of the map with double satchel. I can go only that far. And it's the same thing with coaches. I think some coaches like understand game theory really well. I think they understand characters and agents and synergies really well. I think they understand like map dynamics really well. But one thing they might not understand is individual player limitations. Like if you're talking a simple, or you're talking about like a CNET or something, like if you're talking this game or TENS or whatever, those individuals have certain limitations where vast majority of players, you say like, these are your limitations, but you are like an outlying factor and you can get away with this. And I think a lot of coaches, especially if they don't have like a pro playing background, they might not understand like what people can or can't get away with, or they might not understand if you're feeling really confident and you're just like absolutely slamming the other team and you're like 20-6 for like scoreline and you have a 3K in the round, you're gonna keep peaking because you're getting those kills. And even though like, you know, statistically speaking, you shouldn't go for this play, it's too greedy, whatever, like when you're playing, you need to be like in tune with your confidence, with your just everything about your instinct, everything. You need to be as one, like mind, body, whatever. And then you can't just be looking just at like stats, like, oh, you have man advantage, play the advantage, fall back. Like you can't do that.
Sure.
This actually kind of reminds me of like something which I was always curious about, which it's a little bit tangential, but I remember, I think this is something that also exists in League of Legends, but I'm going to give an example that I remember from Overwatch, which is that the Dallas Fuel, so Envy's franchise, they adopted a system where they specifically had coaches for each role. So it was like there was a tank coach, there was a DPS coach, and there was a support coach. And I always wondered at the time, like, is that actually too fragmented? Like, and what you're just describing here about like how everyone needs to understand everything and should have experience, and how some coaches look at things from like a perspective that doesn't necessarily consider these other aspects of the game. And I understand a couple of the examples you just gave were about like the actual feelings of the players and the situation the players in game. But like, I'm just wondering, like, unless I'm mistaken, in Valorant, I don't think we're at a point where like teams are hiring like an initiator coach and a whatever, a smokes coach or whatever. But like, is that something that you would say is not necessarily a good thing because of the fact that it doesn't force you to sort of cross-pollinate the understanding of different roles?
Yeah, I think that would be too fragmented. I think it's good for people to talk. And it's another thing that I talk about a lot, especially like with my stream, is when you have players, like you're an aspiring pro or you're a current pro, you should be talking about the game with other pros. Like that's such a cheat code in getting better, is just like sharing ideas or beliefs about the game, whether you agree or not. Like having more perspectives is never a bad thing. And it's always good to just be like, I'm going to talk to this person even though I don't like them, or I'm going to talk to this guy about like this match that's going on. Oh, like you want to watch these VCT matches, and you know, whether it's making fun of people or not, whatever, you can watch the games and you can talk about the games and be like, why is this guy doing that? Oh, he did that because, and then you just learn something new. So you should always be talking about the game with other people, and as you said, cross-pollinate. So I think it's the same thing when it comes to like coaches and players. Because I think even when it comes to players, I feel like in Overwatch, it was more like, I don't know which word to use. I don't want to say rigid or something, but like a tank player plays tanks.
DPS player plays DPS. It was even smaller. It was like a main tank player plays main tank, and off tank player plays off tank. Yeah. So in Valorant, it's like, I feel like people should be more flexible in their roles. And I think where people kind of don't understand why like certain people should be on certain roles is, I think it should come down to individual style. This player is more aggressive. They should have more tools so that they can, you know,
mobility tools or tools so that they can fight people with, and they can just like, whether it be like a dash or smoke or like a flash or something like that, they can fight with these tools. And then players that are more passive, more reserved, more support type players in style that are like, I'm just going to do like all the high percentage plays. I'm going to play like, I'm not going to take that many risks. I'm going to be risk averse. I'm going to, like, my teammate needs my help, I'm there to help them. They should be on things like, potentially smoke agents or teams, agents that have like darts and drones and stuff like that. Because that's just going to be naturally how it works. But outside of that, it doesn't necessarily matter what agent you're on. So you can play a smoke agent very aggressively, and you can use the smokes to aggressively like help you take map control and help you take fights, and you can play in the smokes and you can be really aggressive with it. Or you can have a smoke player that's very passive with the stuff, and you can have like a chamber that's really aggressively like looking for kills, and you can have like the turret guy that's just sitting there posting up waiting for everyone else to do everything, and they're just cleaning up and then clutching up the round at the end of the round. And I think no matter what it is, you're going to have people that are switching between like, maybe they're on initiator, and then maybe they're on duelist, and then maybe they're on like a second controller, and they're going to be like moving around roles. And roles, I feel like the way that nomenclature, I feel like the way that the word's been put into the game by Riot isn't really like, I feel like people play to the roles too much, like in a box, like, oh, I'm a sentinel, I'm flank watcher, I am this, I can't do anything outside of this box, I cannot do anything. And the same thing with like duelist. Oh, you're duelist, you have to send it in, and we can never see a duelist ever lurk or flank or anything like that ever, like on attack. Like the lurker can never lurk. The duelist can never lurk because they're supposed to open the site. They're the entry players. It's like, yeah, but then you see like the Jet in a certain area. Oh, Jet's A, they're going to do an A play. It's like, imagine the Jet's A and the rest of the team's going B and the Jet's part of the
perfect fake.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. So it's like, you need to be able to kind of like just blur those lines, and people need to be able to move between different roles and know exactly how they're supposed to like play that role. But also teams should be looking to put the players on certain agents that make sense for like the rest of the style. Like if you're the most aggressive player on the team and everyone else are passive and they're like sitting behind, they should be on agents that can support you, and you should be on an agent that can like seek out those duels. And that's basically how it should boil down. You shouldn't have people that are super reserved on aggressive roles and people that are super aggressive, like, you're just like making them sit back and just watch the action.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, by the way, this topic of roles is one that actually I always have people 24/7 coming at me in CSGO, right? Because I made a video a long, long time ago where I explained the concept of different roles you could have in a team, right? But you can tell people never actually listened to the video. They only sort of heard the sort of headline version because they thought my version was like that. It's like there's 5 roles. One is like support, one is entry, and every team has to have this. What they don't understand is why I actually explained in the video was that famous premise that the roles in basketball, for example, they even say this famous line that they were invented to explain to the layman roughly what the game is played like. It's not really a set thing. Like, as you say, if you're the point guard, right? Yes, in theory, the point guard passes the ball. If the point guard's LeBron James, he just scores the ball whenever he wants, by the way. He's the best player, so obviously if he has the best shot, he takes it. That's actually how you should play, like you say. You play to your strengths and your personnel. So I would even say, I think some of that shit sort of comes from... I think some of it comes from League of Legends and the fact it's another Riot game, because I have to say, you know this if you play Dota, even though in theory it also has the 5 roles based on like farm distribution, in Dota it's way more about what heroes you have, who's on your team. Like famously, there were some mega teams in Dota who the 3 position player was like absurdly fucking good, so guess what, they let him farm up way more than you normally would, whereas 3 positions is supposed to be the one who sort of like takes a bit less, is in like the lower part of the farm distribution compared to the 1 and the 2, the carry and the mid player. So like I would say that angle's a bit stretched by people. And on the coaching part, even in League, right, there are certain teams have it, Gio, like there might be a team like has like a top lane positional coach, but it's very rare they ever had like all 5. It was usually, as far as I can tell, if one of your coaching staff just happened to be a specialist at that role. And even then, it's not like he coaches you like, right, I'm sort of your mini coach. It was more like he was almost like your assistant. It's like he would come to, say, the top lane player and he'd be like, right, here's all the new picks they're doing in Korea and here's how they play this matchup. And it's more like he was just there to like individually help you. Like, you having problems with matchup I need to talk to the other coach about. And I also thought the logic was, in theory, you were trying to use the coaching coaching aspect to be more responsible how the team communicates. So instead of like the top laner in League just being like, oh, you're all like, never give me any resources or ganks, it sounds like he's just whining. Like if you actually have a real coach studies it, like, no, actually, you know, his champion he plays doesn't really play the way we're trying to win our team comp. It would be like a more like reasonable way to have that discussion instead of like, if you know how League is, it's almost like solo queue. Like the players themselves are complaining. Like the joke is even in pro teams, people are like blaming the jungler because he's not in all lanes at once. He's like, bro, I'm a pro player jungler. Like, that's just how it is. So yeah, there's some of that for sure. Because I always thought the same thing, Steel. To me, even in Counter-Strike, there aren't set roles like that. Like, you know this, if you don't have an amazing AWP, you don't have to run the AWP all the time. You run it minimally when you can on the sides where someone can hold that one spot with an AWP. Or you have like a player, like maybe like when you AWP'd, you just use it tactically as the IGL to spot a line to see where they are, and then you hold an angle. You're not using it like Simple would, because I would tie it into that, mate. That's where the coach gets lost, in my opinion. But
hey, I used to be a primary up, and I used to do this stuff
a long time ago. Yeah,
a long time ago. Hey, it was only a decade ago. Relax.
True. That's to me. That's only half my career. So yeah, it wasn't that long ago at all. No biggie. Here's what I would say, though. What you say is correct, right? The coaches, here's where I get why they think this way. They're looking at the game, like you said, from a game theory angle. That's the perfect way to say it. They look at the game like it's chess. But here's the analogy I would give to the coach. This is like if it was chess, but the actual how strong the piece is based on something other than what the piece's rank is. So to use your analogy, in Counter-Strike, if my like lurker piece, let's say, I don't know, randomly we're going to say it's like the bishop or something, that's simple in my case. Whereas on your other team, maybe it's some like player half as good. Well, I'm obviously going to do different things if I have simple as that piece than if I have a player barely competent at that role. So yeah, I think that's the problem with the coaches, because I see that in League in the games where you draft a lot, mate. They really do put together what in like a perfect simulation would be a great draft. But then when you look at their team or the opponent, you're like, dude, this is a terrible draft. Like, your guys can't do some of the shit you want, and what you're thinking is going to play out ain't going to play out. Like, as I say, that's simple in that role, and you're acting like it's just generic player A. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and also just like in general, like ability combinations and stuff, you know, like not even thinking about the player behind the agents. You know, you have certain ability combinations on the opposing team, then yeah, maybe certain set plays that you have in mind are just going to go straight out the window, because like they're just going to get eaten alive the second that you try and execute them.
How do you actually find that angle as well, Steel? Because that must be the other weird thing. Like, even though economy and how you use the utility was a big deal in CSGO, we didn't have abilities. Like, abilities are basically the utility half the time, right? So how is that angle to work with?
In terms of what specifically? Just like
how do you, as an IGL, is it trickier? Is it more like setting up around a specific thing that someone does in the same way as if you had like two smokes, you want to use only one on this side? Is there more of that? Is it just, do the players decide that stuff more?
I think it's different, and I think it also like depends on your approach. So in CS even, you would basically boil it down to like, okay, bare bones, we're going overpass B. We have a smoke and 2 flashes. Where do we want these to go? Okay, if we're coming short heavy, we do the smoke in the same spot every time. It's like, do you pick bridge or do you pick mid site? And then you say, okay, if we're coming short heavy, we do this flash and then that flash, the initial like pop flash to set us up, and then the flash to like blind everyone so we can actually spill out. And if we're coming long heavy, like through monster, you do these other flashes. It's the same thing in Valorant. Okay, we want to end on whatever, A site ascent. You just pick one smoke that you need, and then like everything else is basically like bonus. If you have like a Jet on your team and she has a dash and a smoke, she can choose to do this. But if she doesn't have that, then you know you have to figure something else out. Do you have a dart? Yes or no? And it's like, at the end of the day, you just need to boil it down to bare bones. Bare minimum, what do we need to go into this site? And then are we waiting for that to come off cooldown? If it's on cooldown, for example, yes or no? Or are we just going without it? And I wouldn't say the game's necessarily trickier or less tricky than CS. I think it's just different. So in CS, it was very easy to count like, oh, you can hear the smokes across the map, 5 smokes. They have like, potentially 5 mollies. And then between HEs and flashes, there would be like 5 HEs and then at most 5, up to 10 flashes, but maybe 5. And it's like really easy to keep track of like what the enemy has left in terms of smokes, and be like, okay, this is the last smoke. They smoked at 47. It's gone at 30. At 32, we're going to throw our smokes and flashes, and we're just going to pop on them. They're out of util. Done. And it's very easy to keep track of that type of info. And as an IGL, like you can keep track of everything on your own. But in Valorant, it's on like a lot of individuals to kind of keep track of things, you need to keep track of smokes, and then darts on cooldown. Breach has stun still, and then they've used one flash, but it's going to come off cooldown, and all these things are going to be constantly changing because things
are these all just being commed? Do people type any of them? Do they just come on verbally? What do they do?
It should be commed verbally. So like something I do, for example, is I'll be like, okay, Omen smoked 115. It's gone at 1 minute. Or Viper walled at like 1 minute. It's gone at 45. You know how long like a smoke will last for, and then you can get timings of like when is the next action going to happen. And it should be the same thing with like they have no dog, they have no drone. I broke both cipher trips, killed turrets broken. Stuff like this should absolutely be calmed. And if possible, you should also note the time when it was broken or when it was like whatever, when it's going to go away, when it's going to come back off cooldown. That should absolutely be calmed and shared, because that's telling the other players on the team what they can or cannot do, or should not do. I should wait for this because they have it, or I should not wait for this because it's on cooldown. I need to fucking go now. So as an IGL in Valorant, a lot of it comes down to how vocal are your teammates and how autonomous are they? Like, are they going to go and make their own decisions? Are they going to make mini plans between themselves? If like two people are working a certain part of the map, are they going to make plans on them by themselves, or do you make it for them? Is there someone going to suggest ideas like, dude, I just saw this, like when they do this, they're over rotating to A, we can go B now, and you have someone else like be a secondary voice that you can just be like, okay, yeah, we're B splitting, or let's regroup B main. That absolutely needs to happen, and you need to have a lot more people talking in this game because there's just so much more stuff to keep track of that you just can't. It's like playing StarCraft where you have to keep track of like all these timings. But I feel like when I was only like Masters level Terran, and even that, a lot of it was like instinctual of like when I'm gonna get enough minerals to like rebuild an army, and when have I like spammed like building a new army that I have to get my SCVs to build more supply depots and stuff like that. And it's about this time I need to like group my guys up in this medevac and go and do like a drop on their expansion. All of that is just like one flow, because it's just like, it's just instinctual. You have these built-in timings and everything. But when you play Valorant, you don't have these built-in timings because every team's going to play different. Their composition's going to be different agents. They have a different mixture of agents. So like this team's running Astra and Sage, and that team's running Omen and Breach. It's like different things. So you need your teammates to be able to speak up and give suggestions and make note of like important things that have happened throughout the round. Yeah, absolutely.
I think like one of the things that has always drawn me so much to hero shooters, and I suppose this is also applicable to MOBAs as well, but is the fact that you have to like time so much stuff in the sense of not just like, oh, we want to use this piece of utility because it benefits us in this really direct way, but also like we also need to consider that we might need to use this piece of utility or this ultimate to bait out a piece of their utility or their ultimate, so that then we have an advantage like indirectly from that. So it adds all of these layers to it, which like I as someone who this is like the only really like esports game genre that I've ever been in, is something I really admire, and yet I still fail to understand how people are like proficient enough at it to actually be able to do it to a good level. But like that's always been one of the biggest things that impresses me about this type of game, is there's so many moving parts and so many different reasons why a piece of utility usage might benefit you, but also like it's a sacrifice as well, right? Because it's like, okay, well, we're relinquishing
trading resources.
Exactly, like we're relinquishing the fact that we can use it in situation A because we're banking on it working for situation B, and then that providing like a bigger reward at the end.
Yeah. So this is one of the things I learned from playing Hearthstone, is like health is a resource. So you have all these like, different resources to help you like achieve your end goal. Your end goal is to win the round. So if you're on attack, you want to either eliminate all the defenders or you want to have the spike explode. So how can we get into the situation where one of those two things can happen? Well, we have to go through these roadblocks. They have these abilities. They have these ultimates. And the IGL could say like, okay, like they're going to use this ultimate. If I use my Killjoy ulti, they're going to Sova ulti it to break it. But like they might not use their Sova ulti to break it. So you need to have like contingency plans or like plan Bs almost. But also you have to, on an individual level, be able to identify things like, we're pushing into A site on attack, and one of the defenders killed one of our guys, and he got his ulti from that kill. Now they have the ulti, and we didn't really account for that. Hey, I'm making a plan right now. They have this ulti. As soon as we plant, they're going to do this. We need to do action, whether it be like push into them or fall back out of the site, play the post-plant lineups or whatever. It doesn't matter. People need to be able to make contingency plans and change things on the fly if like things aren't going according to plan. Like you need to be able to just like roll with the punches, just thrive in the chaos, and just understand that information's always going to change. Everything's going to change, and you need to be able to keep up with it and make your own decisions on an individual level.
Yeah, I know that concept actually on a smaller level actually exists in League of Legends when you lane. Like there are certain matchups where essentially you trade like some health if they want to harass you so they have less mana so then they can't do the spells at the same time. And essentially it's like how you know the flow of the lane if you understand that principle. Like my champion has more health than his so I can actually trade it and be at like half health because he can't kill me because he doesn't have the mana, etc. It sounds complicated, but again it just ties back into what G was saying. It's like if you want to be a pro player, by the way, this is why I always say the worst thing we do is call them bloody players because it makes it sound like it's fun to fucking scrim and practice. Like it's work. It's hard work. Like as you can imagine, what he's talking about here, that's just being a player. Imagine being the IGL. Like you essentially just exist in a permanent state of anxiety that at some point there's something new you have to completely think about and factor in, right? And as you say, it's imperfect information. You can never actually know all the info in the scenario.
Yeah.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.